The chandelier light cast golden shadows across the reception hall as I watched Emma, my brother-in-law's new bride, float across the dance floor in her designer wedding gown. Expensive champagne flowed freely, crystal glasses clinked in celebration, and the string quartet played softly in the corner of the luxurious hotel ballroom. The Anderson family knew how to throw a lavish wedding, I'd give them that much. I straightened my navy blue suit jacket and adjusted my tie, feeling somewhat out of place despite being part of the family for nearly 5 years now. My husband Michael stood across the room, engaged in animated conversation with some of his college friends. He caught my eye and winked, the small gesture reassuring me as it always did. That man was my rock, my shelter in the storm that was his family. "Alex, darling, there you are." The unmistakable voice of my mother-in-law, Vivian Anderson, cut through the ambient chatter. She approached with her signature cocktail in hand. Her posture perfect as always, designer dress impeccably fitted to her slim figure. Behind her followed her husband, Richard, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and calculating eyes that had sized me up from the moment Michael had first introduced us. "Mrs. Anderson?" I nodded politely. We'd never progressed to first names despite my marriage to their son. "Beautiful wedding." "Yes, well, Emma deserves the best," Vivian said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Carter is so established already, vice president at his father's firm at just 32. They'll be moving into that beautiful house in Greenwich next week." The comparison hung in the air like stale perfume. Michael and I had chosen different paths. He'd walked away from his father's investment firm to start his own architectural practice, a decision that had created a rift in the family that had never fully healed. "Michael's practice is doing very well," I said, keeping my voice even. "We're very happy with our choices." Richard cleared his throat. "Speaking of property, Alex, that's actually what we wanted to discuss with you." I felt a familiar tension creep up my spine. Whenever the Andersons wanted to discuss something, it rarely ended well for me. "The penthouse in Tribeca," Vivian continued, her voice dropping to ensure no other guest could hear. "We've been thinking about Emma and Carter's future. They'll need a pied-à-terre in the city for business meetings and social events." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what about our penthouse?" "Well, dear." Vivian's voice took on that condescending tone she reserved specially for me. That property was always meant to stay in the Anderson family. Richard bought it as an investment for the children. My confusion deepened. "But Michael and I have been living there for 4 years. We've renovated it completely." "Yes, and we've appreciated you looking after it," Richard said smoothly. "But now that both our children are properly settled, it's time to redistribute family assets appropriately." I felt as though I'd been slapped. The penthouse was our home. We'd transformed it from the sterile investment property it had been into a warm, comfortable space filled with our chosen furniture, our art, our memories. "Richard and I think it would be best if you handed over the keys tonight," Vivian said, pulling an envelope from her clutch purse. "We've had papers drawn up. It's all very simple." I stared at the envelope, unable to form words. The audacity was breathtaking. "Emma and Carter will need to move in some of their things next week while they're between properties," Richard added. "We thought it would be easier if we handled the transfer tonight. Among family, rather than making it uncomfortable. You want us to just leave our home? Tonight?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Vivian's smile tightened. "Alex, darling, it was never really your home. The deed is in the Anderson family trust. Michael knew that." "Did he?" I asked. Suddenly uncertain. We'd moved in shortly after our wedding, and Michael had handled most of the paperwork. He'd never mentioned anything about the penthouse not being ours. "Of course he did," Richard said firmly. "It was always understood that the Tribeca property would eventually go to whichever of our children needed it most. And right now, that's Emma and Carter." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I need to speak with Michael about this." "There's nothing to discuss," Vivian said, pushing the envelope toward me. "The papers are all in order. We just need the keys." "You're asking me to make my husband and myself homeless at his brother's wedding reception?" I asked incredulously. "Don't be dramatic, Alex," Richard scoffed. You can stay in a hotel for a few days. You're both young, you'll find somewhere else. I looked across the room at Michael, who was still laughing with his friends, completely unaware of what was happening. 5 years of marriage, 4 years in that penthouse. Countless hours spent making it our own, and his parents wanted to take it away with the stroke of a pen. I think we should all discuss this together, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As a family. There's really nothing to discuss, Vivian insisted, her smile now brittle. The decision has been made. We're just informing you as a courtesy. I felt a hand on my shoulder and nearly jumped. Michael had appeared beside me, his expression concerned. What's going on? He asked, looking between me and his parents. Michael, darling. Vivian's voice instantly transformed to honeyed warmth. We were just discussing the Tribeca penthouse with Alex. Michael's brow furrowed. What about our home? The word our sent a wave of relief through me. At least he considered it ours. Your father and I feel it's time to reassign the property to Emma and Carter, Vivian explained. They need a place in the city, and that was always the plan for the penthouse. Michael's expression hardened in a way I rarely saw. What plan? Son. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know that property was purchased through the family trust. It was always intended to be used by whoever needed it most for advancing the family interests. And you've decided that's Emma and Carter, Michael said flatly. Well, they're the ones working within the family business, Vivian said with a dismissive wave. It makes sense for them to have the property that's closer to the office. I watched Michael's face carefully, still uncertain if he'd known about this arrangement all along. We've asked Alex to turn over the keys tonight, Richard continued. The paperwork is all here. Michael's eyes found mine, and in them I saw a flash of anger that reassured me. He hadn't known. This was as much a surprise to him as it was to me. No, he said simply. Vivian blinked rapidly. I beg your pardon? I said no, Michael repeated more firmly this time. That penthouse is our home. Alex and I have put years of work into it. We're not giving it up. Michael, be reasonable. Richard's voice took on the authoritative tone he'd likely used throughout Michael's childhood. The property belongs to the Anderson Trust. It's not yours to keep or give away. Actually, Dad, Michael said, his voice remarkably calm. If you check the deed, which I'm guessing you haven't done recently, you'll find that the penthouse was transferred into my name when Alex and I got married. It was your wedding gift to us, remember? I watched confusion. Then alarm spread across Richard and Vivian's faces. That's impossible, Richard said. I never authorised... You signed the papers, Michael interrupted. At the rehearsal dinner, you made a big speech about passing down family assets to the next generation. There were witnesses. I remembered that night vaguely, the excitement of the rehearsal dinner, the flow of champagne, Richard's uncharacteristically emotional speech. I hadn't realised he'd been signing over the penthouse. That was just a ceremonial gesture, Vivian interjected quickly. Not a legal transfer. The lawyers who prepared the paperwork would disagree, Michael replied, as would the New York Property Records Office. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is outrageous. You tricked me into signing those documents. No, Dad. Michael's voice was steady. You signed them willingly. You just didn't think I'd ever stand up to you when you decided to take back your gift. The tension between father and son was palpable, years of unspoken resentment bubbling to the surface. I placed my hand on Michael's arm, partly to support him and partly to remind him we were at his brother's wedding. This isn't over, Richard said in a low, dangerous voice. Actually, it is, Michael replied. The penthouse belongs to Alex and me, legally and completely. If you have any questions about that, you can contact our lawyer. He took my hand. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to enjoy the rest of the reception. He led me away from his stunned parents, guiding me toward the dance floor as the quartet began a new song. Did you know they might try something like this? I asked quietly as he took me in his arms. Not exactly, he admitted, but I'm not surprised. They've never accepted my choices, walking away from the family business, marrying someone who wasn't from their social circle. He pulled me closer. That's why I made sure the penthouse was legally ours before we moved in. I knew they might try to use it as leverage someday. Your mother looked like she was going to explode, I whispered, glancing back to where Vivian was now furiously whispering to Richard. She'll get over it, Michael said, though we both knew that wasn't true. The Andersons didn't forgive what they perceived as betrayal. Are we going to be okay? I asked, suddenly worried about the ramifications of this confrontation. Michael's arms tightened around me. More than okay. We have our home, our life together, and we don't owe them anything. As we swayed to the music, I spotted Emma in her white gown, watching us from across the room with a puzzled expression. She had no idea about the storm that had just erupted, or how it might affect her perfect new life with Carter. Part of me felt sorry for her. She was still firmly under her parents' control, even if it came with financial benefits and social status. I'm sorry my family is so difficult, Michael murmured against my hair. They're just part of the package, I replied, leaning into his solid presence. And you're worth it. Little did I know that this confrontation at the wedding was only the beginning. The Andersons weren't people who accepted defeat gracefully, and in challenging them, Michael and I had set in motion a chain of events that would test our relationship, our resolve, and our future together in ways we couldn't have imagined. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, illuminating the polished hardwood floors and the modern furnishings we'd selected together. Michael was still asleep beside me, his face peaceful despite the confrontation with his parents the night before. I grabbed my phone and slipped out of bed, padding quietly to the kitchen. 6 missed calls from Emma, 3 from Carter, and a text message from Michael's mother that simply read, "This isn't over." I put on a pot of coffee and leaned against the marble countertop, taking in the space that had almost been taken from us. The open-concept living area overlooked the Manhattan skyline, a view that still took my breath away even after 4 years. We'd designed every inch of this place together, the custom bookshelves that housed Michael's architectural books and my collection of classic novels, the dining table we'd commissioned from a woodworker in Brooklyn, the artwork from local artists we'd discovered together. This wasn't just an investment property or a convenient pied-à-terre. This was our home. My phone buzzed again. Emma. With a sigh, I answered. "Hello? Alex?" Emma's voice was shrill. "What the hell happened last night? Mum and Dad are absolutely livid." "Good morning to you too, Emma," I said, keeping my voice even. "Congratulations again on your wedding. It was beautiful." "Cut the crap," she snapped. "Mum says you and Michael are refusing to vacate the Tribeca property. They promised it to us as a wedding gift." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "They what?" "Carter and I need that penthouse," Emma continued, oblivious to my shock. "His firm is expanding their New York operations and will be spending at least 3 days a week in the city. It makes perfect sense for us to have it." "Emma," I said slowly, "that penthouse is our primary residence. It's our home. Your parents can't promise it to you because it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to Michael and me." "That's not what Mum says," Emma retorted. "She says Dad always kept it in the family trust, and Michael is trying to steal it by claiming it was given to him." I took a deep breath. "The deed is in Michael's name. Your father transferred it as a wedding gift 5 years ago. There's documentation." "Well, Dad says he was tricked." Emma's voice rose. "And honestly, Alex, it's just like Michael to pull something underhanded like this. He's always been jealous of Carter's success." The accusation stung. Not just because it was false, but because it revealed how Emma truly viewed her brother. Michael had never been jealous of Carter. If anything, he'd pitied him for following their father's predetermined path, instead of finding his own way. "That's not true, and you know it," I said firmly. "Michael has built his own successful practice from the ground up. He doesn't need or want your father's approval." "Whatever," Emma dismissed. "The point is, you need to do the right thing. You and Michael can find another place to live. Carter and I need that specific location for networking with clients." The entitlement in her voice was staggering. "Emma, I'm sorry if your parents made promises they couldn't keep. But we're not giving up our home." God, you're being so selfish, she exploded. This is exactly why Mum says you were never right for Michael. You've turned him against his family. I heard movement behind me and turned to see Michael standing in the doorway, his expression darkening as he listened to his sister's voice, audible even from several feet away. Emma, I'm going to stop you right there, I said, my patience wearing thin. This isn't about me versus your family. This is about your parents trying to take away something that legally belongs to us. We'll see about that, she threatened. Carter's father knows the best property lawyers in New York. If you think... Michael crossed the room and gently took the phone from my hand. Emma, it's Michael. Congratulations on your wedding. Now stop threatening my wife. He put the phone on speaker just in time to hear Emma splutter. I wasn't threatening. I was just explaining you were threatening legal action over property that belongs to us, Michael said calmly. On your honeymoon, no less. Don't you have better things to do? Michael, be reasonable. Emma's tone switched to wheedling. You know how much this means to us. Carter's career depends on making the right connections, and that penthouse is in the perfect location. I am being reasonable, Michael replied. The reasonable thing to do when someone owns a property is to respect that ownership. The penthouse is ours, Emma, legally and rightfully. I'm sorry if Mum and Dad told you otherwise, but that's between you and them. You're choosing her over your family, Emma accused, her voice breaking. Again. Michael's jaw tightened. I'm choosing truth over manipulation, and Alex is my family too. Mum and Dad will never forgive you for this, Emma warned. That's their choice, Michael said. Enjoy your honeymoon, Emma. Don't let this ruin your trip. He ended the call before she could respond. For a moment we stood in silence, the morning sun casting long shadows across our kitchen. I'm sorry, I finally said. I shouldn't have answered. Michael pulled me into his arms. Not your fault. I knew they'd start the pressure campaign immediately. Your mother texted that this isn't over, I told him, showing him my phone. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Of course it isn't. Not for them. Do you think they'll really try legal action? They might, he admitted. But they won't win. I made sure of that when I had the property transferred. Dad definitely signed the papers. He was just too arrogant to read them carefully. I leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't, he said firmly. They did that all by themselves. He kissed the top of my head. Don't worry. We've weathered worse. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that the Andersons weren't going to let this go easily. The pressure escalated from texts and calls to more direct actions. First came the formal letter from their lawyer, claiming that Richard had been unduly influenced when he signed the property transfer and demanding that Michael return the penthouse to the family trust. Our lawyer assured us the claim had no merit. The transfer had been properly documented, witnessed and recorded. But the legal threat was just the beginning. Next came the social campaign. Vivian began telling friends and business associates that Michael and I had manipulated Richard, spreading rumours that cast us as opportunists who had taken advantage of a moment of parental generosity. People Michael had known his whole life suddenly became cold when we encountered them at events. Clients began cancelling meetings with vague excuses. They're trying to damage your business, I realised one evening, as Michael reported losing another potential contract. This is about punishing you professionally. Michael nodded grimly. Dad's reach in this city is extensive. He's calling in favours, making sure doors close for me. Can he really do that? I asked, horrified. Watch him, Michael said bitterly. The pressure continued to mount. Emma and Carter returned from their honeymoon and joined the campaign against us. Carter, who worked for his father's investment firm, which had significant business ties to Richard Anderson's company, began spreading rumours in financial circles that Michael was unstable and untrustworthy. By the 3-month mark after the wedding, Michael's architectural practice had lost nearly half its clients. Projects that had been in development for months were suddenly cancelled. Investors pulled out of joint ventures with vague concerns about recent information they'd received. The strain began to show in our relationship. Michael worked longer hours, desperately trying to salvage projects and relationships. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a paediatric nurse, worried about our financial stability if Michael's business continued to suffer. "Maybe we should consider selling the penthouse," I suggested one night, as we sat on our balcony overlooking the city lights. "It's not worth all this." Michael's expression hardened. "That's exactly what they want, to break us down until we give in. But your business, I'll rebuild," he said firmly. "I've done it before, I can do it again. What I won't do is let my parents dictate our lives through manipulation and threats." I reached for his hand. "I'm with you, whatever you decide." "I just hate seeing what this is doing to you." He squeezed my hand. "To us," he corrected. "And I'm sorry for that. But giving in now would only prove to them that their tactics work. They'd never stop trying to control us." He was right, of course. This wasn't really about the penthouse. It was about control. About punishing Michael for choosing his own path instead of the one his parents had mapped out for him. But the Andersons weren't done. Their next move was more personal and more painful than anything we could have anticipated. I was working the night shift at the children's hospital when I received an urgent call from the Chief of Staff, asking me to come to her office immediately. When I arrived, her expression was grave. "Alex, we've received some concerning information," she began carefully. "Allegations about prescription medication discrepancies on your shifts." I stared at her in shock. "What? That's impossible." "Nevertheless, we're required to investigate," she said. "In the meantime, we'll need to place you on administrative leave." "This is insane," I protested. "I've never done anything improper with medications. Never." "I hope that's true," she said, not unkindly. "But the allegations are specific and detailed. They came from someone with considerable influence who wishes to remain anonymous." I felt sick. There was only one family with both the motive and the connections to fabricate such allegations. When I got home, still in shock, I found Michael on the phone with his lawyer. "They're coming after Alex now," he said grimly when he hung up. "This has gone too far." "Can they really do this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Fabricate allegations that could ruin my career, all over a property dispute." Michael's expression was murderous. "They're showing us how far they're willing to go. This isn't just about the penthouse anymore. It's about making us pay for defying them." That night, as I lay awake beside Michael, I wondered how we'd gotten here. 5 years ago, when I'd first met him at a charity function for the hospital, I'd been charmed by his warmth and his passion for his work. He'd seemed so different from the wealthy, entitled people who typically attended such events. When he'd told me about his family, he'd been honest about their controlling nature, but I'd never imagined they could be this vindictive. The next morning, Michael made a decision. "We need to fight back," he said over breakfast. "Not just legally, but with the same weapons they're using against us." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Information," he said, his expression determined. "If they want to play dirty, we need to be prepared." He contacted a private investigator, a former client who owed him a favour. The mission was simple. Dig into the Anderson family businesses, find out if there were any skeletons in their closets that we could use as leverage. It felt wrong, stooping to their level, but we were fighting for our livelihoods now, not just our home. And as the investigation progressed, we discovered that the Anderson family empire wasn't as pristine as its public image suggested. Richard Anderson's investment firm had been involved in several questionable deals over the years. Nothing overtly illegal, but certainly ethically dubious. Instances where they'd used insider information to gain advantages, or leveraged political connections to secure contracts that should have gone through competitive bidding. More relevant to our situation, however, was what the investigator found about the Tribeca penthouse itself. The property had been purchased by Richard through a complex series of shell companies, using funds that had been earmarked for a client investment project. It appeared that Richard had diverted those funds temporarily, using them to secure the penthouse before returning them to the investment pool with fabricated gains to cover his tracks. "This explains why he was so eager to keep the property in the family trust," Michael said when we reviewed the findings. If the true source of the purchase funds ever came to light, he could be in serious legal trouble. So what do we do with this information? I asked, uncomfortable with the idea of blackmail but desperate for a resolution. We don't expose him, Michael decided. Not yet. First, we offer a truce. We show him just enough of what we know to make it clear that mutually assured destruction isn't in anyone's best interest. The meeting was set for a private dining room at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant. Richard and Vivian arrived precisely on time, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes cold. I hope this meeting means you've come to your senses, Richard said as we took our seats. Actually, Michael replied calmly, we're here to discuss a ceasefire. Vivian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A ceasefire implies we're at war. Aren't we? I asked. You've attacked Michael's business and my career, all over a property that legally belongs to us. We've done no such thing, Richard dismissed. If Michael's clients are losing confidence in him, perhaps he should examine his own business practices. Michael slid a folder across the table. Before we go any further, you might want to look at this. Richard opened the folder, his expression changing subtly as he scanned the contents. Documents outlining the complex financial maneuvers he'd used to purchase the penthouse, bank transfers that revealed the temporary diversion of client funds, emails that showed his knowledge of these improper actions. Where did you get these? He demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. Does it matter? Michael countered. What matters is that we have them, along with much more that isn't in that folder. Vivian looked between her husband and the documents, alarm growing in her eyes. Richard, what is this? Nothing, Richard said sharply. Just some financial records being taken out of context. The context seems pretty clear, I said, and I imagine the SEC and your clients would find it equally clear. The threat hung in the air between us. For the first time since I'd known him, Richard Anderson looked uncertain. What do you want? He finally asked. It's simple, Michael said. You call off your campaign against us. No more legal threats over the penthouse, no more sabotaging my business, and you retract the false allegations against Alex at the hospital. In return, these documents stay private. Richard's jaw tightened. You'd blackmail your own father? I learned from the best, Michael replied evenly. You taught me that power is about leverage, Dad. Now I'm using that lesson. A tense silence filled the room. Vivian placed a hand on Richard's arm, a silent communication passing between them. And Emma and Carter? Richard finally asked. What about their need for a New York residence? That's not our problem, I said firmly. You promised them something that wasn't yours to give. You can buy them another property if it's so important. Richard studied us both, calculation evident in his eyes. And if we agree to these terms, what assurance do we have that those documents won't find their way to the authorities anyway? You have my word, Michael said. Unlike some people in this room, I stand by my promises. The barb hit its target. Richard's expression hardened, but resignation had begun to replace the anger. Fine, he said at last. We'll call off the lawyers, and I'll speak to the hospital board about the misunderstanding regarding Alex. And my business contacts? Michael pressed. I can't undo conversations that have already happened, Richard hedged. But you can have new ones, Michael insisted, making it clear that any concerns you shared were unfounded. Another long pause. Very well. As we left the restaurant, I felt both relief and unease. We'd won this round, but at what cost? The rift between Michael and his family now seemed unbridgeable. Do you think they'll honour the agreement? I asked as our car pulled away from the curb. Michael gazed out the window at the city lights. They will as long as they know we have the leverage, but they'll never forgive us for this. Not ever. I leaned against his shoulder. I'm sorry it came to this. He pulled me closer. I'm not. They showed their true colours. Better to know exactly who we're dealing with. In the weeks that followed, the Andersons kept their word, at least on the surface. The legal threats over the penthouse ceased. Michael's business began to recover, as clients who had mysteriously disappeared returned with apologies and new projects. The hospital concluded its investigation, finding no evidence of wrongdoing on my part, and I was reinstated with a formal apology. On the surface, life returned to normal. But the experience had changed us. Michael was more guarded now, more strategic in his business dealings. I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting another attack from the Andersons. The carefree couple we'd been before the wedding confrontation seemed like distant memories. We didn't hear from Emma or Carter directly, though through mutual friends we learned they'd purchased a luxury condo in a different part of Manhattan. Occasionally we'd see pictures of them on social media, always perfectly posed in their perfect life, but now I understood the price they paid for that perfection. Complete submission to Richard and Vivian's control. 6 months after the confrontation, as Michael and I enjoyed a rare quiet evening at home, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognise. "Michael Anderson," he answered professionally. I watched as his expression shifted from neutral to surprised, then cautious. "Yes, this is still my number," he said. "It's been a long time." He listened for several minutes, occasionally asking brief questions. When he finally hung up, he looked troubled. "Who was that?" I asked. "My grandmother," he said, sounding stunned. "My father's mother. I haven't spoken to her in years. She lives in a retirement community in Florida now." "What did she want?" "To warn us," Michael said, running a hand through his hair. "She says my parents are still plotting against us, that they're just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike back." I felt a chill. "Do you believe her?" "Grandma Martha has never lied to me," he said slowly. "And she's never approved of how my parents operate. She said they've been making regular trips to Florida to visit her recently, asking questions about the family trust, about properties that were transferred years ago. Including the penthouse," I guessed. Michael nodded. "She thinks they're looking for a loophole, some way to challenge the transfer that we haven't anticipated." "Can they do that?" "I don't know," he admitted. "The transfer was legal, but if they're desperate enough, they might find some technicality to exploit." That night, as we lay in bed, I could feel Michael's restlessness beside me. The spectre of his parents' vendetta had returned just as we were beginning to feel secure again. "Maybe we should sell the penthouse after all," I suggested quietly. "Buy something else with the proceeds, something with no connection to your family." Michael was silent for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he turned to face me in the darkness. "Is that what you want?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "I want us to be free of this cloud hanging over us. I want us to have a home that's truly ours, with no strings attached to your family." He reached out to touch my face. "Then that's what we'll do, not because they've won, but because we're choosing our future on our terms." The decision brought an unexpected sense of relief. The penthouse was beautiful, and we'd made it our own, but it would always be tainted by the battle it had caused. A fresh start seemed increasingly appealing. We listed the property the following week. Given the prime location and our extensive renovations, our real estate agent assured us it would sell quickly and for substantially more than the original purchase price. We began looking at other properties, brownstones in Brooklyn, modern apartments in different parts of Manhattan, even houses in the suburbs. The penthouse sold within 2 weeks to a foreign investor who offered well above asking price. As we signed the final paperwork, I felt a weight lifting. We'd found a brownstone in Park Slope that needed some work but had enormous potential. Exactly the kind of project Michael loved. The day we were scheduled to close on the new property, Michael received a call from our lawyer. "Something's wrong," he said, hanging up. "The funds from the penthouse sale haven't been released to our account. The lawyer says there's some kind of hold on the transaction." "What kind of hold?" I asked. Alarmed. "He's not sure yet," Michael said, already reaching for his jacket. But he mentioned my father's name. We rushed to the lawyer's office, where the situation became clear. Richard Anderson had filed a last-minute injunction, claiming that the penthouse had been improperly removed from the family trust and that Michael had no right to sell it. The proceeds from the sale were now frozen pending a court decision. "Can he do this?" I asked our lawyer, a seasoned property attorney named David Rosenberg. "He can try," David said grimly. It's a desperate move, but it's temporarily effective. The funds are in escrow until the court rules on the legitimacy of the sale. How long will that take? Michael demanded. Months, potentially, David admitted. Your father has engaged a high-profile firm that's known for dragging out proceedings. So we can't close on the new property, I realised. Not without those funds, no, David confirmed. Michael's expression was thunderous. This was their plan all along. They let us think we'd won, waited for us to sell the penthouse, and now they're trying to keep us from accessing the money. It's actually quite clever, David said reluctantly. By not contesting the sale itself, but rather your right to the proceeds, they've created a situation where the property is gone. But you can't benefit from it. What do we do now? I asked, feeling sick. We fight, David said simply. I'll file counter-motions immediately, but you should prepare for a legal battle. And battle it was. The case dragged on for months, just as David had predicted. The Andersons' lawyers filed motion after motion, each one seemingly designed to prolong the process and drain our resources. We were forced to withdraw our offer on the brownstone and find a rental apartment instead, a step down from the penthouse, but the best we could manage with our finances in limbo. Michael's business suffered again, as he was forced to spend days in court or in depositions instead of working on projects. The stress began to take a toll on both of us. We argued more frequently, often over small things that masked the larger fear, that the Andersons might actually win this round. 8 months into the legal proceedings, I returned home from a night shift to find Michael sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by papers, his laptop open before him. You should be sleeping, I said, dropping my bag and moving to kiss his forehead. Couldn't, he said, rubbing his eyes. Been going through some old family documents Grandma Martha sent me. Find anything useful? I asked, collapsing into the chair across from him. Maybe, he said, pushing a yellow document toward me. This is my grandfather's will, the original one, not the revised version my father presented to the probate court after Grandpa died. I examined the document, trying to make sense of the legal language. What am I looking for? Section 4. Paragraph B, Michael directed. About the family trust. I found the section and read it carefully. The family trust shall be administered for the benefit of all descendants, with no single beneficiary having authority to restrict or remove assets without the unanimous consent of all adult beneficiaries. I looked up at Michael, understanding dawning. Your father didn't have the right to put the penthouse in the trust in the first place. Michael nodded, a glimmer of the old fire in his eyes. Not without my consent, which he never sought. And there's more. Grandma says there are other properties, other assets that Dad has been controlling exclusively, in violation of the trust terms. Will this help us with the current case? I asked. It might do more than that, Michael said. If we can prove that Dad has been mismanaging the trust for years, violating its terms for his own benefit, it could invalidate his current claim entirely. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Have you shown this to David? First thing tomorrow, Michael promised. This could change everything. He was right. When David reviewed the documents, his assessment was cautiously optimistic. This creates a completely different legal landscape, he explained. Instead of defending your right to sell the penthouse, we can counterattack by challenging your father's authority over the trust assets entirely. The strategy worked better than we could have hoped. When our lawyers presented the original will and trust documents in court, along with evidence of Richard's systematic violation of the trust terms, the judge's interest was visibly piqued. Richard's lawyers scrambled to counter, but the documentation was clear. 2 weeks later, the judge ruled in our favour, not only releasing the frozen funds from the penthouse sale, but also opening the door for a broader examination of Richard's management of the family trust. This isn't just a victory, David told us as we left the courthouse. It's a complete reversal of fortune. Your father now faces potential liability for years of improper trust management. Michael was quiet as we drove home, his expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. Are you okay? I asked, squeezing his hand. Just thinking about what this means, he said. For my family, for Emma and Carter. You're not responsible for the fallout, I reminded him gently. Your father made his choices. I know, he sighed, but this will affect them all. The family business, their social standing, everything they value. I understood his conflict. Despite everything, these were still his parents, his sister. What do you want to do? He was silent for a long moment. I want to offer them a way out, he finally said. One last chance to end this war. The meeting took place in our lawyer's office this time. Richard and Vivian arrived looking less polished than usual, the strain of recent events evident in their faces. Emma and Carter came too, their expressions a mixture of anger and fear. Thank you for coming, Michael began formally. As if we had a choice, Emma muttered. Michael ignored the barb. I've asked you here because we're at a crossroads. The court's ruling gives us the right to pursue a full audit of the family trust, which could have serious legal and financial consequences for all of you. Richard's jaw tightened. Get to the point, Michael. I'm offering you an alternative, Michael said, a settlement that would avoid further legal action. What kind of settlement? Carter asked, speaking for the first time. Michael slid a document across the table. It's quite simple. Dad will resign as trustee of the family trust, appointing an independent manager approved by all beneficiaries. All trust assets will be properly documented and administered according to Grandpa's original terms. In return, we won't pursue claims for past mismanagement. Richard scanned the document, his expression darkening. This would effectively remove my control over the family assets. Your exclusive control, Michael corrected, which you were never supposed to have in the first place. And if we refuse? Vivian asked. Then we continue in court, I said, with the evidence we already have, plus whatever else a full audit reveals. Emma looked between her parents and her brother, confusion evident. I don't understand. Dad, you said the trust was yours to manage however you saw fit. Your father has been operating under his own interpretation of the trust terms, Michael explained gently. An interpretation that contradicts our grandfather's explicit instructions. You're trying to destroy everything we've built, Richard accused, his voice tight with anger. No, Michael countered. I'm trying to restore what was meant to be a legacy for all of us, not a power base for you alone. The tension in the room was palpable as Richard and Vivian exchanged looks, some unspoken communication passing between them. We need time to consider this, Richard finally said. You have 48 hours, Michael replied. After that, we proceed with the audit. As they filed out of the office, Emma lingered behind, waiting until her parents and husband had left before approaching us. Is it true? She asked Michael, her voice small. Has Dad been lying about the trust all this time? Michael's expression softened. It's complicated, Em. I think he started with good intentions, wanting to grow the family wealth, but somewhere along the way it became about control instead of stewardship. Emma looked down at her designer shoes. The Greenwich house, she said quietly. It's part of the trust too, isn't it? Michael nodded. Most likely. So we could lose it, she said, more a statement than a question. Not necessarily, Michael assured her. The settlement preserves existing arrangements. It just prevents further mismanagement. She studied her brother's face. Why are you offering this? After everything that's happened, why not just take them down? Because despite everything, you're still my family, Michael said simply. And I'd rather find peace than win at all costs. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I've been awful to you, to both of you, she added, glancing at me. I believed everything they told me. They're your parents, I said gently. Of course you believed them. Carter knew, she admitted, wiping at her eyes. At least he suspected Dad wasn't being honest about the trust. But his career is so tied to Dad's business. You don't have to choose sides, Michael told her. That's the whole point of this settlement, to create a fair system that works for everyone. Emma hesitated, then stepped forward to hug her brother. I'll talk to them, she promised. Make them see reason. After she left, Michael and I sat in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. "Do you think they'll take the deal?" I asked eventually. "I think Emma will convince them," Michael said. "She has more influence than she realizes, especially now that she's starting to question their version of events." He was right. 2 days later, Richard's lawyer contacted David to accept the settlement terms. The relief was immense, like setting down a heavy burden we'd been carrying for far too long. With the legal battle behind us and the funds from the penthouse sale finally available, we were able to resume our search for a new home. We found not a brownstone this time, but a converted industrial loft in a vibrant neighbourhood filled with artists and young professionals, as far from the Anderson family's traditional Upper East Side world as we could get while still remaining in Manhattan. The space was raw and open, with exposed brick walls, massive windows and soaring ceilings. A blank canvas for us to make truly our own, with no history, no baggage, no connection to the past. As we stood in the empty loft after closing, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting patterns on the concrete floor, Michael pulled me into his arms. "What do you think?" he asked. "Can we make this home?" I looked around at the vast, untouched space, imagining the life we would build here. "I think home isn't about the walls or the address," I said. "It's about us, together, making something that's ours." He kissed me then. A promise sealed between us. Whatever came next, we would face it together, on our own terms, in our own space. The relationship with the Andersons would never be simple or easy. Too much had happened, too many harsh words exchanged, too many lines crossed. But with the settlement in place, and an independent trustee overseeing the family assets, the most toxic elements of their control had been neutralized. Emma and Carter began to visit us occasionally, tentatively at first, then with growing comfort as they discovered that freedom from Richard and Vivian's constant influence allowed for a different kind of relationship. Vivian maintained a cool distance, unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in the conflict. Richard, surprisingly, showed signs of genuine reflection, occasionally reaching out to Michael with awkward attempts at reconciliation. As we settled into our new home and our lives gradually returned to normal, I often thought about that moment at the wedding reception, when Michael's parents had demanded our keys and Michael had simply said no. How different things might have been if he had given in then, if we had surrendered our home without a fight. Instead, that simple refusal had set in motion a chain of events that ultimately revealed the truth about the Anderson family dynamics, forced accountability where there had been none, and gave us the strength to define our own path forward, not just in terms of where we lived, but how we lived and what we valued. One evening, as Michael and I sat on the rooftop terrace of our loft, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink, he took my hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful, "about what we learned through all this." "What's that?" I asked. "That sometimes standing your ground isn't just about the specific battle you're fighting," he said. "It's about defining who you are and what you won't compromise on." I leaned against his shoulder, thinking about how far we'd come from that moment at the wedding. "And what won't you compromise on?" He smiled, pulling me closer. "Us, our life together, the future we're building." He gestured at the cityscape before us. "All of this, it's ours because we fought for it. Not just the property or the money, but the right to make our own choices." As the last rays of sunlight faded and the city lights began to twinkle around us, I felt a profound sense of peace. The battle for the penthouse had been painful and costly in many ways, but it had also been necessary, a crucible that had tested and ultimately strengthened our relationship, our resolve, and our vision for our life together. We had lost a penthouse, but gained something far more valuable, the certainty that we could weather any storm together, that we were stronger than the forces that had tried to control us, and that our home, wherever it might be, was defined not by walls or deeds, but by the life we chose to build within it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.